we are still in a lockout for Major League Baseball. We're going to lose games.
I'm not sad about it. I'm angry about it because I don't think this has to happen.
It doesn't. Like, what is happening here where you aren't figuring this out? You've had 3 months now to figure this out. The lockout started December 2nd.
They were not going to do anything until they could put an artificial deadline on. And as with every work stoppage in baseball dating back to the 1980s, early 80s, it all is usually about a fight between the big market owners and little market owners. And the players are just on the outside trying to influence the decisions that are being made.
Yes. Well, and here's what's interesting. So this is what the players are asking for here in the lockout. And I did get this from Cleveland.com. It's Paul Hoynes' article. If I mispronounced your last name, I'm sorry. But this is a full breakdown of what they're asking for. Reduction from 6 to 5 years for a player to become a free agent. And the owners aren't budging on this at all. They're asking for players with 2 years of service to be eligible for arbitration instead of 3 years. Again, the owners don't want anything to do with it. End tanking.
Mm-hmm.
Which who doesn't want to end tanking? Reduced revenue sharing, which is an interesting one, and end service time manipulation, what we like to call the Chris Bryant rule.
The Chris Bryant rule.
For that last one with the Chris Bryant rule, with the stink that Scott Boras made, how did you not see this coming? You and I were talking about this in 2015.
They knew it was coming. And what they did was, what the Cubs did with Chris Bryant was almost criminal. I mean, bad.
But that's the rules.
I know, and they played within the rules. I mean, I think what they're going to try to do is they will raise the rookie minimums from about $500 or $600 to $775,000 or $800,000 a year,
sure.
Which young players are going to say, yeah, give it to me all day long. We'll take it. This
isn't football where you can get away with that. Baseball is a much more veteran sport.
But if you're making $500,000, you're a first-year player, and you're going to change that to $800,000 for the first 3 years, that's a lot of money that they're going to now, a rookie contract is going to be worth to you.
For sure.
It comes back to, and guys, really, we aren't trying to just push the plan that we described a few weeks ago. However, we could solve all of this. And this comes back to the fact that what is the most exciting part about baseball every year, or the most news? It's a trade deadline where, like last year, the Cubs were sellers, and they gave away their entire team, which was tragic.
And I want to get into that, and I am trying to push our plan, by the way, because it's brilliant, and I want it to be in place. But to get into these before we jump down that rabbit hole, because we will, trust me. Reduction from 6 to 5 years for a player to become a free agent. I don't understand how that's unreasonable. That's how every other sport, major sport in the United States does it. And think about it. These guys sitting in the minors, that clock doesn't start until they are in the majors at the beginning of the season.
Okay. The only thing that I will say, and this is an older way to look at it, because the average age in baseball has come way down. You didn't used to get out of the minors and into the majors until you're 27 or 28, because you played 5 years in the minors to learn your craft. Now they're bringing them up.
Only certain guys, though.
Certain guys, true. It is certain guys, but baseball is a much longer career, and that's the owners are saying, look, you can play for 20 years. You've got to give us that 6 year so we can get some of our investment back. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's what they're arguing.
I don't understand how if somebody's up there and say you put in NFL rookie rules right now where you have 4-year contract with a 5-year team option. How is somebody giving you 4 years, not giving you return on your investment?
In their mind, they've invested a lot of money to get you ready, to invest in you as far as marketing and everything else goes. And the bottom line is the owners want to control you for that extra year. Baseball owners have been some of the worst partners players have had in any major sport.
Right.
And if the NBA has the best relationship and
Definitely.
football is someplace in between. And the argument is football players are taken advantage of, but baseball, it's always been just head to head. They've tried to keep the players under their thumbs dating back to the beginning of the game, and it's time for them to look at the players as partners.
It is, and I think that's a big step. Is saying, listen, 5 years, you're a free agent. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask for. Players with 2 years of service time to be eligible for arbitration. Honestly, if you're changing it to 5 years of a contract, you don't necessarily need that, especially if you go to a 4-year contract with a 5th-year team option. You don't necessarily need to go that route. There's ways to negotiate where you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Ending tanking. This goes with reduced revenue sharing. And I've read a lot into this the last little bit with the lockout going on, and I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit as well, but revenue sharing has become one of the worst things to happen in baseball in the history of the sport.
It has driven salaries way down. Bob Costas said something years and years ago. Baseball's not like football, where you have a national TV contract and very small local contracts. In baseball, you have massive local contracts, billion-dollar deals for New York and Chicago. His solution, and I think it's brilliant, is all of that goes into if the Brewers are playing in New York, and granted they're in different leagues now, but let's just use it as an example. So for those games, the Yankees would get 60% of the local radio revenue and local stand revenue, and the Brewers would get 40%.
Yeah.
And reverse it when you come to Milwaukee. That would even things out so that the money would be there to invest, and you can't use the argument, well, they're a small market team. They don't have that kind of revenue. Somebody's got to be like the Maras were in football and step up and go, you know what? You can't have football without New York and Green Bay. And nobody's been willing to do that in baseball and say we can't have baseball without Kansas City and New York.
Right. I think a big issue is too, and this is one thing I didn't realize, is that yes, there's revenue sharing. Living in small markets in Milwaukee area now, in Tampa Bay,
right.
Previously, you're like, well, these teams aren't making any of the money. It makes sense. Revenue sharing is going to allow them to compete more, but there's no stipulations that they have to spend that revenue sharing on players.
Look what just happened today. I just saw it before we went on the air. Derek Jeter announced that he is ending his relationship with the Miami Marlins.
Hold on, wait for it. I got a new sound.
Breaking news.
Okay, no.
Okay. Jeter's ending his relationship with the Marlins, and why? Because the philosophies didn't mesh up. In other words, Jeter wanted to win, and the other owners wanted to pocket a lot of money.
It's possible. I mean, we're speculating here, but there's definitely visions that weren't there, and I think Jeter, a former player, is on the player side on this one.
I do too.
I don't think they're asking for much, and with the revenue sharing, what they're saying is this is terrible because you have teams, and I've used Pittsburgh as an example for a long time, and this is nothing against any Pittsburgh Pirate fan that's watching. I am in support of you. Pittsburgh paid for a brand new gorgeous stadium for their baseball team, and they refuse to put a competitive team on the field. And they're constantly spending less salary. Same with Miami. They're constantly spending less than anybody else in the league on talent. All of their big names are trading away at the trade deadline, and which means they are pocketing all of that shared revenue for themselves and not doing what they need to for their fans.
Take a look at Miami. That stadium, built at public expense, went up when we were down there, and they have just said, thanks, guys. And they're making millions upon millions, and yet they will not put a competitive team. The last competitive team they had was when they won the World Series.
Yeah, we don't need
10 or 15, whatever.
3.
But that's when they got, the push to get the new stadium. It got there.
Yeah.
I look at Milwaukee, and believe me, I had this conversation with fans in Tampa Bay on the radio at the time. Everybody was saying, well, they built Miller Park. We don't need one. We've got a stadium that's just as good here. The Trop is awful. It's got to go,
It's pretty bad.
or Tampa Bay has to move. One of the two. It's not. They can't.
It's like
they
the
can't
Milwaukee
concede.
Bucks had with
Sure.
the Bradley Center. I mean, the NBA looked at him and said, "Listen, you're getting a new stadium either here or in Seattle."
Correct.
And Major League Baseball needs to do the same thing.
And Milwaukee built the stadium for the Brewers.
Yeah.
They've been competitive. Mark Antonazio has been a great owner. He puts a competitive team on the field. He
does.
takes that money he gets and puts it back into the players, to the surprise of some people. But it would be easy to do around the leagues if there was true revenue sharing and make the players a partner in your business instead of treating them like employees.
Yeah, well, and just put stipulations on revenue sharing that says X amount of this has to go to player spending.
They've been asking for that for 40 years.
I don't see why it's not happening. Why? How, as an owner, I'm a competitive human being. I'm a very competitive human being when I get into things.
Sure.
You are too. We've always been competitive. I could never own a team and just be like, I'm going to take all this money and not be competitive. Like how you cannot, especially as a billionaire owner, like you've had to be competitive to get where you are.
Mhm.
You've had to be cutthroat to get where you are. Why are you not that way now with your team?
It's just always been that way between the big markets and the small markets, and the players are caught in the middle. And honestly, and I am going to go back down that bunny hole, if they chose to use our method of restructuring the leagues and the divisions, having instead of 3 5-team divisions, having 3 or 5 3-team divisions, all of a sudden that competitive balance is there all the time, and the trade deadline is not the biggest story, and it shouldn't be. The trade deadline
Right.
should not be where you've got some buyers and you're sellers, especially if there's only 3 teams in your division. You got to be real careful because it's
Right.
easy to get to the playoffs then.
Well, here's the divisions again, right? We've talked about these before on different shows. So you can definitely check it out. I am extremely passionate about this because it does fix it. You know, I have a friend Brian that's a big Red Sox fan, and he and I were going back and forth on it a little bit there because, you know, he's saying the Mets are never going to get there, and I just don't think that's true.
No, that's not true.
The wild card is still pretty new. Like the wild card is in my lifetime.
Mhm.
It was, I think I was in high school when the wild card came out. I mean, it's pretty new. It used to be only Yankees, Red Sox went to the playoffs. Only one team went. And you can do the same thing here where only one team goes. It makes it more competitive. And again, it's for the betterment of baseball. And this is where Rob Manfred needs to get better.
Oh,
Rob
he absolutely
Manfred,
does.
people gave Seelig flack for being a commissioner. Rob Manfred may go down as the worst commissioner in baseball since Bud Adams in the American League. He allowed the 1919 Black Sox scandal to happen.
When Goose Gossage says he wants to punch you in the mouth, you're not handling things well.
No, because you need to be looking at the bigger picture. Roger Goodell, for instance, you know, he got booed, right? For a long time, people didn't like him, but he saw the bigger picture. He looked at fantasy football and said, this is going to take us to that next level, and made sure it was in all the stadiums. He looked at the big networks and looked at Thursday Night Football and extending the games, and has been looking at the bigger picture. He stood up to Jerry Jones and said, we're not canceling revenue sharing.
Right.
This is for the betterment of the game. And this is where Rob Manfred needs to grow a pair and say, we need to make changes for baseball. This isn't about you. This isn't about what you're going to make next year. This is about saving a sport that Americans love.
Baseball is no longer America's pastime. That's been taken over by football. If baseball wants to be around for the next 3 generations, it needs to make some drastic changes. And one of those is Bud Selig made it a regional game to try to save it,
Right.
to get a lot of money there. It's got to be
again.
It's got to become a national game, or they're not going to survive.
Not even a little bit. And this makes it national. And Brian, I know you're listening out there. Brian made the comment like you just made about the trade deadline. That's where it came from, saying, well, the trade deadline, won't be as exciting. It's one of the most exciting things in the sport of baseball. Do you know how sad that is?
Yeah.
Do you know how sad that is? In the middle of because he's right. The trade deadline is the most exciting thing to happen in baseball. Not the World Series. not opening day,
Who's going to be a
not
buyer?
free agency.
Who's going to be buyers and who's going to be sellers?
Right. Who is going to tank the rest of their season to the point where their fans no longer pay attention, and who's actually going to have a chance at winning a World Series?
And look at what happened with the Cubs last year. They traded off their World Series team.
Everybody.
They're not competitive
I stopped
this year.
watching. I don't even
Yeah.
know who's on the team anymore, man. I mean, I do, but I stopped paying attention. My season was over.
And that's what needs to stop and should never be allowed to happen again. And if you only have 3 teams in the division, and granted in Chicago it would have been the White Sox, the Cubs, and the Cardinals, just pride alone is not going to let you lose to the Cardinals.
Correct. If you look at, let's look at these. If you look at Colorado, Seattle, and Kansas City as a division, those guys, Colorado, Seattle, they're trade deadline people all the time.
Right.
Their fans haven't had anything to cheer for in a long time. All of a sudden, they're going to have a chance to actually win in the division. And Colorado, who's hasn't been relevant in a while now, all of a sudden has a chance. Same with Seattle. It's the trade deadline should not be the most exciting thing in your sport.
That's
That's pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic that the middle of the season, when half of your league is going to literally give up, is the most exciting part.
Can you imagine any football team doing that in any division? Every year in football, you have at least 6 teams that make the playoffs that didn't make it the year before.
Right.
And thereby you're going to have 6 teams that were in the playoffs the year before that aren't in this year. And that's been great for football. And it could be the same thing in baseball. And they have to look at some big time rule changes in order to expand and grow the game.
They do. And I find it absolutely ridiculous that baseball is allowing this to happen. Rob Manfred, I hope you're listening. You need to grow a pair and stand up to these owners. You need to look at them and say enough is enough. We need to save this sport. This isn't about making money. This is about saving a sport, because you know what? If people continue to turn off, then we're not going to have any money to make. TV's not going to want us anymore. And baseball is going to become just as watched as the WNBA, because nobody's going to pay attention anymore.
Well, you look at all these stadiums around the country, and Milwaukee was built by public money. Most cities are saying we're not doing that anymore.
Right. There's no return on investment.
No, there's not. But Milwaukee, I think, has been a good example. Going forward, it's got to be a public-private partnership. But he's taken the money he's gotten and he's put a competitive team on the field most of the time.
Built a terrible stadium, but that's not his fault. That's before he was there.
Yeah. And I hate to say this, Spurs fans, the sight lines in Miller Park are atrocious. They're awful.
The sight lines in Miller Park are terrible.
County Stadium was better as far as I'm concerned. Now, the food in Miller Park, still the best.
Food is good.
Love it. But taking that away, you've got the Shrine. Look the Ricketts have put millions upon millions into Wrigley Field.
They have.
But you traded off your whole team.
For a casino. That's what made me aggravated as a Cubs fan more than anything, is that the Ricketts traded off our whole team and then announced a $200 million project to build a casino.
I have been the biggest anti-Pete Rose person on the face of the planet. I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. However, if baseball is going to get in bed with casinos, put Rose in, put the Black Sox in, because you've lost all your integrity.
You have. I mean, putting a casino in Wrigley Field, that's just another thing. You're turning baseball into a dog track, right? Into a horse racing track. And that's nothing against dogs racing. I'm not getting into that. But I'm just saying.
No, there's a lot wrong with dogs racing.
There's a lot wrong with dog racing.
But
I'm glad they got rid of it. But it's essentially what it is. It's an old school dog track at that point. That's disgusting. Don't put a casino in your stadium. Where's the purism of the sport? The sport is not for grown adults to sit there and gamble. The sport is for kids.
Yes.
This is a game. This is for fathers and sons like you and I when we used to go, for me and my boys to go and watch a game that grown adults get to play and get to enjoy, and the kids get to look up to these players. And you're putting a casino in there?
Nothing draws a community together more than a team playing for a World Series. And it's happened all over the country, and the fact that it's going away from it after less than 5 years, 6 years from winning a World Series, you give away your entire franchise.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And the changes that we've talked about, and the one Bob Costas, speaking of which, also agrees with us, you've got to move up the start games. If you really think nobody will watch your games unless they start at 9 o'clock, you've got way bigger problems.
Right. And to just go on to this before we get more into the rules, because there are some concessions the owners have made, right? But the big thing is with these divisions, the 3-team divisions, if you're in a 3-team division and you are like you look at the Pirates, Phillies, and Nationals, right? If you're a Pirates fan and in a 3-team race, you're in last place and selling off your team every single year, I'd revolt as a fan against the owners.
Sure.
There's no reason you can't win in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh used to win all the time.
Correct.
Before we go on to the next one, because we did forget to do something on the show, please like, subscribe, and share.
I always put the button in there.
I know,
just
but we
always
hadn't said it today,
I always
so
get really excited and just
Yeah.
want to keep going.
I know, and I want to get you made me stop, and so I'm stopping you now.
It's fair.
But it's
That's fair.
true. I mean, I want to see baseball grow. I want to see people excited. We watched the
Right.
World Series in school. It was on in the afternoons on Saturdays and Sundays. You can start some of the games at 9 o'clock, I guess, but not all of them. Little
No.
kids should need to be able to see their heroes,
I agree.
get attached to them, and say, "Yeah, I want to be able to play just like that guy."
I agree, and I hear the rules here that we've talked about in the past. You know, moving up the start time of the playoff games, like you said, you have to have faith in your product that people are going to watch it. Honestly, that surprised me more than anything. You believe so little in
Yeah.
your product that you're putting it so late at night that most of the country can't watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That-
it's probably a great time for the West Coast, but the East Coast games start at 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Cubs won the World Series at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, a.m.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
It's unacceptable. You need to be starting these games earlier. You can start these games at 4 o'clock.
Sure.
People will come.
And people will, yes.
Well, what if we have a game in LA? Well, you better hope that you believe in your product enough that people are willing to take off work to go to a World Series game.
Or if they're willing to turn on their TVs at 1 o'clock in the
Right.
afternoon on a Saturday and Sunday to watch the game. If you really don't think they will, shame on you.
I mean, yeah, you're competing with football, but you're in championship at that point. It should be a different conversation, and you should, again, believe in your product more. And if people aren't watching in prime time your sport versus regular season and other sports, then you probably need to tweak your sport and do a better job. And the big thing is the time inning. You know, Mike Greenberg on his show. I remember I called him Mark, by the way. Sorry about that last time. I didn't even realize it till I watched the video back. Slip of the tongue. But Mike Greenberg had mentioned this on his show. One pitching change in the middle of an inning per game, you know, after we had talked about it. So thank you for the shout out on ESPN. We appreciate it.
appreciate that.
I think that saves on time a lot. It forces people to pitch better. The 12th inning is a big one we've discussed several times, and the owners have conceded now they are willing to put a DH.
I think
throughout the
that,
Major League Baseball.
as much as I hate to say it, I would love to see it go the other way. Ship a sail. There's going to be a DH in both leagues.
Tweak the rules to make it better for today. The DH is going to be there. Tweak the rules as such. These 5 rules help. Again, this fixes baseball. It fixes tanking, right? Because you're putting 3-team divisions in. It fixes that trade deadline. That shouldn't be the most exciting part of your game.
No. And as far as Brian's concerned, the Red Sox shouldn't be in the playoffs. Ever.
Brian, I didn't say that. He did.
Oh, I'm proud to say it. Ever. But they will once in a while.
Again, though, the trade deadline shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is. You want to
Right.
keep your core players. The best sports want to keep their core players throughout. Free agency should be the most exciting off-season thing that you have going for you, not the trade deadline on who's going to move. Build your team to win and continue to try throughout.
And charge more for your ads. Have fewer of them, especially in the playoffs.
Well, and here's the thing, too. Well, if we start these games at 5 o'clock, you know, say, I don't know, what, 6:30 Eastern time, the West Coast isn't going to tune in until the 7th inning. So what? Charge more for the...
I don't believe that anyways.
Well, and even if they do, charge more for late inning commercials then.
Yeah. There's ways around it. The batters, we've offered changes for the pitchers. The umpire's got to look at the batter and go, you're not going to be readjusting your glove after every pitch. Keep your butt in the...
And they've gotten better about that.
They have, but there's still too much allowed to step out. If you're a right-handed pitcher, your right foot should never be allowed to step outside the box.
Well, and I'm sorry, this is one you're going to disagree with me on 100%, but it is time to do something about a strike zone. If these umpires cannot figure out how to be consistent with a strike zone, you got to bring in machines. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I want to see the
umpires. You don't have
umpires.
a choice. It's too many times where you're seeing it called a strike one inning and a ball the next inning. It's not fair to the pitchers. You have to figure out how to be consistent. If it's going to be a ball, call it a ball every time.
That's been going on from time immemorial. However, I will say this, and I've told you this before. You want to raise the strike zone a little bit? Allow the umpires to wear the balloon chest protectors again. Now that they wear the same stuff that catchers do, they get so low, it alters their perspective of the pitches coming in. But be consistent. I don't care if the guy is calling a pitch 3 or 4 inches outside, but he calls it that way in the entire game. That's fine. So be it.
And that's what players have said too. So be it. If you're going
Yes.
to call it that way the entire game, at least we can adjust to it.
They respect the umpires for doing that.
Yep.
They know what they're going to get, and they get it for the entire
Too
game.
often. And the problem is you got guys standing behind the plate that are older than you and can probably see worse than you.
Probably.
And those
Yeah.
guys shouldn't be sitting behind the plate anymore.
No, they're getting better about bringing in teams that rotate. There's vacations, and we can go through all that. But I think Joe West just retired. I believe he was the oldest guy. If you're an umpire and you really can't get down anymore because you've got such a stomach, time to move on or get in shape.
It
You
should
just
be.
have to-
And what's that one umpire's name? Angel Hernandez?
Yeah, he should just go away, period. He's the worst umpire in the history of baseball.
I turn off games when that guy is umpiring.
Yeah.
He's the one I have the biggest issue with when it's like, well, that was a strike 2 seconds ago.
But no, it's not.
No, it's not. And framing a pitch is great, if catchers can do that. But it is time now where just make it consistent. Just you can still have an umpire back there.
Look,
And it can still be a part of the game where you call strikeouts. Just allow the machine to tell them if it's a ball or a strike. They can focus on other things. You're not changing the game that much.
I don't agree with it, but I can't say that the technology's not there to do it because they've been doing it in tennis for years and years and years with Hawkeye. Can they do it? Possibly, but I've even seen where they've actually shown technology-wise what they're looking at. They are even off. But
it's not about being off.
It's
about
being consistent. Yes. And Johnny Bench was in, I'm going back to my Johnny Bench stories, but he was the absolute best at taking a ball that may be 3 inches outside, and by the time he catches the ball, it's on the corner, and that's a strike.
Wilson Contreras for the Cubs is very much that way. He's very good at that. But again, there's consistency to the pitch. And that lets the pitcher know, hey, I can bring it in because if it's here at the end, the umpire's going to call it.
Right.
It's not about...
But that's training
off.
That's training. That's not.
It is, but you have the technology now where it's not about being off. It's about being consistent.
Agreed, but that's not what's at issue between the players and the owners right now. The owners are once again basically trying to break the union.
They're 100% trying to break the union. The owners are completely in the wrong here. They need to be able to bend on this. And the players, they're not asking for anything. I can come back to the screen here where it shows exactly what the players are asking for. They're not asking for a lot.
They need to be look, owners and players at some point need to be a partner in these things,
right,
for the good of the game and to grow it instead of the owners look at these guys as interchangeable employees, and nobody is irreplaceable. Granted, but they're more than just employees. These are
some of the most talented athletic people in the entire world, and if a players' union has to go to owners and say we want tanking to stop,
what's wrong with? Well,
that's a problem.
The union the players were also the one that went to their union first and then to baseball and said we want PEDs out of the game.
Right.
And I applaud them because it cleaned up the game.
It did.
And the players, once again, are going, we need to fix this because it's our game and we love our game and we want to see it grow. And the owners rather, need to stop worrying if they're worth $4 billion or $5 billion if you're the Yankees. Yeah.
And again, the fact that revenue sharing isn't going back into the players, I'm guaranteed there's people out there that say, well, these guys get paid so much anyways. Who cares? Who cares what they get paid? They're the ones making the product. I hope you enjoyed that clip of Sports Talk with Dad. If you enjoyed that clip, I know you'll enjoy this clip. And if you enjoy all of our clips, check out a full episode right here. And one last thing I need from you to make sure I can keep Jobu stocked with rum and keep Pogo here on the payroll, subscribe right up here.